go to John. And, of course, on the Thursday here, we'll take a deeper look at the matchup with the Carolina Panthers and everything going on around the NFL and some of the storylines happening today at the NovaCare Center, where Chip Kelly did speak today. Had a couple interesting things, I thought anyway, that he talked about. And one thing, John, I want to start with is, this Carolina Panthers team, I think that Chip Kelly made a good point that they are far different than the team that the Eagles really dominated last year.
Yeah, and first and foremost, it has to do with the injuries that Cam Newton played through last year, really banged up. Was coming off ankle surgery, had a couple other issues. He wasn't himself, and he wasn't the guy who's going to show up Sunday night, who is, possibly the best dual-threat quarterback in NFL history, to be honest, as far as the ability to beat your throne and run in the football. I don't think anybody has been on that level, certainly since probably Steve Young, maybe. And he brings more power to the dance, and the fact that he's a 265-pound guy. And get ready for the quarterback sweep, because it's coming this week.
Yeah, that's a play that you've talked about a couple times that they like to run, and he mentioned that they really like to run the ball. I think they run the ball more than anybody else in the league. Is that a good thing for Philadelphia? I mean, they stop the run very well. Their front seven is very good. Is this a good matchup for the Eagles' defense?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, Carolina is not very explosive. You're dealing with a three-headed monster. There isn't much to go to past, obviously, the quarterback we talked about. Jonathan Stewart's having a pretty good year running back, and Greg Olson's one of the best tight ends in this league. They don't have much else because Kelvin Benjamin went down with a torn ACL. He was their one top-tier receiver. And if you look at it, we've talked about all the issues with the Philadelphia receivers. Carolina's far worse off. Their best receiver is probably Ted Ginn Jr., who's more known for being obviously a return guy. So they don't have much to be scared about. And they're the kind of team that's going to go on those big 12, 13-play drives. And when you have that means there's an opportunity to make mistakes, and there's an opportunity to take the football away. And that's something the Eagles have done. So I think from that standpoint, it is a good matchup for the Eagles, because they should have the chances to create some turnovers.
John, I've been asking this question a little bit today, throughout the course of the day, and getting reaction on it. If I say the Eagles are an average team, 3-3, I think that's pretty average. Are they an average to being a good team, or an average team that's closer to being a bad team?
I think they're an average team closer to being a good team, because I think they're a team outside of the quarterback position. I really think if they had quarterback play to this point, they'd be, at worst 4-2, probably a 5-1 team. I think there's a significant improvement on the defensive side of the ball. I would even call it drastic as far as the secondary goes. So that's going in the right direction. I think after the hiccups early in the season, with the offensive line, that is rounding into form. Jason Peters is playing like an all-pro again. Lane Johnson is playing at a high level. Little disappointed Jason, it's at least an improvement. And since that improvement from that group, all of a sudden the running game has got going a little bit, whether it's Ryan Matthews or DeMarco Murray last week going over 100 yards. And they're still not in love with the receivers. We've talked about that numerous times. But every team in the NFL, even good teams, you can pick apart New England, you can pick apart Denver. Everybody has positions where they're weak at. And the Eagles have a few. But overall, it's a pretty good football team if they had solid play at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and we know that one area that they have been struggling is at the quarterback position. And one thing that Chip Kelly said today, he was asked, is he still have some mental issues there? Is that one of the issues? And he said, no, I don't think there's anything mental here. And one of the things he said, John, that stood out to me was that he feels like he's not letting it go. He's not letting it rip. And I think we talked about that on Tuesday, that there's something that he's holding back. But do you agree with Chip when he says today, he said mentally over the injuries? I think he is. Yeah, I do. So he believes, I guess he says that anyway, that he is mentally over the issues of that injury.
Yeah, I don't necessarily buy that part of it. I agree with the aspect that it's not a mental issue as far as quarterback play, because a lot of his interceptions, they were the right decision, just bad throws. I'm not necessarily convinced he's over the injury completely, not in the physical sense, but in that mental hurdle, because as we talked about, he's seeing ghosts in the pocket, especially against the Giants. I mean, he was hurrying things when he didn't have to hurry things. And to me, that stems from the fact that he's concerned over the fact that people are diving at his legs. This is a live NFL football game. And he's already suffered this injury twice. Well, this is an interesting week. And Sam was asked about the fact that he's playing a guy this week, Thomas Davis, who's playing at an all-pro level, and he's had 3 ACL surgeries. So the possibility to come back from that injury has been proven time and time again. And now he's just got to believe in himself and, as Chip said, start letting it rip.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. And, of course, the Eagles take on the Panthers this Sunday night, this Sunday night on 97.3. I wonder today, I want to get your take on this, John. They were asked about Riley Cooper and how he's able to get open. And Chip Kelly just pulls out that last year it was 60-40. Now it's 51-49. I mean, Seriously, do you think that he's just pulling these numbers out and saying, I'm just going to make you look like an idiot, for printing these numbers because they're not close? I mean, how does he come up with 51-49?
Chip's great when he does that. He rolls off 60-40, then 40-60 last year, and now it's 51-49 as far as man coverage versus zone. Yeah, I mean, sometimes he likes to show off and prove he's the smartest guy in the room, and he's got those numbers off the top of his head. And his claim that is, Riley Cooper, obviously, it's difficult for anybody. Forget about Riley Cooper. It's difficult for Randy Moss, who I think is the best deep threat in the history of this game. If somebody's playing zone, it's going to be more difficult to get behind them. So if you're seeing more man-to-man coverage, and that's what Chip Kelly claims is going on this season and what was going on in his first season, that's why you have bigger plays down the field and guys like Riley Cooper being able to get open. And there's some truth to it. I don't know if his numbers are correct, but Riley Cooper's never going to get behind his zone defense. And, somebody could make a mistake in man-to-man coverage, and that lets him get deep. So there was some truth to what he said, no question about that.
John, obviously some injuries to go over here. Let's start with Kendricks. And he said he did good at practice yesterday, but, again, we'll see where he is. And then, of course, he was back at practice today. I know you guys don't get a chance to see practice, but do you get a chance to see Kendricks walking around afterwards? Do you get the feeling that Kendricks might be available for Sunday night?
Yeah, I mean, he seemed fine, and Chip talked, it's about back-to-back days with Michael, but he seemed fine physically for a number of weeks. And as I said, the last time when he tried to come back, he declared himself a full go, didn't question anything, thought he was 100%, and he didn't last one defensive series. So as much as you hate to say it with certain players, and Bill Davis kind of talked about it yesterday with D'Amico Ryans, who's going through a hamstring issue now, you expect him to be out on the field because of his warrior mentality. With Michael Kendricks, you can't expect it. And whether people think that's fair or not, it's just reality, and that's because of his injury history, and he hasn't been able to stay on the field.
Aguilar, we think, is having some ankle problems. I guess that's what it's coming down to right now. He couldn't play last week, not practicing this week so far. But now Riley Cooper, and it's amazing that we're talking about Riley Cooper as if, wow, if they lose him too, but that would be 2 guys on an already thin wide receiving core. Do you think that both of those guys might miss the game on Sunday night? It appears that Aguilar might be, obviously further away from playing.
Yeah, I would think it's more likely Cooper is to go. Same situation as D'Amico, really. You think he'd be out there if he's able at all. With Aguilar, at least we know we have it pinned down. It's a high ankle sprain, and he said he's day-to-day. But day-to-day is lasting into 2 weeks now, and I don't see on the horizon. My best guess was he would not be there Sunday night, and Riley would be. But yeah, they're going to have a big problem if both of them can't go, because then you're giving multiple snaps to Miles Austin, more than you would like, and you're going to have to play more two tight ends. And Chip doesn't necessarily like to do that, even though it might not be a bad thing, really, if you think about it. And if you play more 12 personnel, which is a running back and two tight ends, then you have Jordan Matthews outside occasionally, and I think that helps the offense too. But that's not what Chip wants, so he definitely wants either Riley Cooper or Nelson Aguilar. One of them's got to play in his mind, and I think it's more likely to be Cooper.
Yeah, and obviously the injuries at that wide receiver position would be a big loss, even if it is a guy just like Cooper or Aguilar. One of the two you would hope can play, because they are kind of thin behind those guys there. If you look at, you mentioned the 12 personnel. He was asked about Ertz, and somebody texted in earlier, how come they don't play more 12 personnel with the two tight ends set there? He said Ertz is doing well as a blocker. Do you concur that Ertz is a capable blocker to put him out there in that role more?
I do not, and that's been his issue. But he's played more this season. He has worked. We talked about it with him at his locker after practice. He's worked very, very hard on improving his blocking, and he is better than he was. So he's kind of surged ahead of Selleck as far as repetitions and number of snaps, because there has been improvement. But he's never going to be a top-tier blocker as an NFL tight end. It's just not what he is. And unfortunately, Selleck, on the other hand, is sort of getting towards the tail end of his productive NFL career, and he's not the same player he once was. So on paper, you see the two names, Ertz and Selleck, and say, yeah, maybe that's a better option. And I tend to agree with that. But it's not as much as a slam dunk as you would think, because Selleck is not the same as he once was, and Ertz has difficulty playing in line and playing like a true Y back. If you think about a Mark Bavaro type or somebody like that, who could just get the edge in the running game and also be a capable pass catcher, that's not the type of player he is.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you're right with the Selleck stuff. That he seems like he is slipping a little bit as a blocker, and that's becoming a little evident on at least in the run game. Where he's typically been a pretty good seal blocker, and it seems like he's not doing as good a job in that area. Let me ask you about the running game this week. How does the DeMarco Murray and Ryan Matthews, the running back tandem, match up with this Carolina defense?
It's a tough week for him, but it's a tough week for everybody. And Chip kind of talked about it. This is the best linebacker group they're going to see all year, because Luke Kuechly's back and Thomas Davis is, as I said, he's playing at an all-pro level. So
yeah,
you have three down linebackers who never leave the field, and they shouldn't leave the field, and they're dominant. And it's going to be very tough sledding when it comes to the run game. It just is. But that's not indicative of just the Eagles. Anybody playing Carolina is going to have the same issues, and Philadelphia is going to be no different. So I think if they're going to come out of Charlotte with a win, Sam Bradford at some point is going to have to make some plays, because it's going to be, really, really hard to say you're going to go in there, run the football 35 times, and come out and get a win. I just don't see that happening against those two linebackers.
Let me ask you this about Carolina. They are undefeated. I think a lot of people don't realize that, or if they do realize it, they don't really put a lot of stock in it. Cam Newton, do you like the Carolina offense of personnel or the Giant offensive personnel?
I like it. It depends. I certainly like what Cam Newton brings, but the Giants have better receivers when they're healthy. As I said, Carolina has nothing at that position now that Benjamin is down, so that's an issue. Obviously, Carolina has a better tight end. They both have weak offensive lines. So I think that's the one thing every offense that is struggling has in common. And the Panthers are 28th in football. They're not very good offensively. The one thing all of those teams have in common is they don't block very well. And that's part of the issue in Carolina. where they can get over the hump more than most teams can if they have the quarterback who has the ability to overcome that kind of stuff and make those sort of sandlot plays that you didn't draw up. But Cam Newton's going to find a way to extend the play or just break out and make a big run. So that's the thing where I think Carolina has the advantage because he's healthy and he's playing at a high level. And not only, you mentioned they're unbeaten. Nobody in pro football has won more games in a row than Carolina. Date back to last season, they've won 9 straight games in the regular season. So they're a better football team than people think.
Yeah. You know, I like them. I've had them all season long. I really think this. You know what I like about them is, and Mick Mixon was on during the midday show today, and he brought up a point. He said, look, if they lose all the rest of their games, one thing that is the voice of the Panthers that I want people to know about this team is they're tough. They're tough, and that's the identity of that team is that they're very tough. I mean, Ron Rivera, defensive-minded guy, was in Philly. Sean McDermott, defensive coordinator. We know here in Philly that didn't really work out. But the last 3 years, if you were to say, other than Cam Newton, what sticks out about that team, their defense is very good. And that's why this could be a kind of game where you're going to have to win the game ugly somehow, which I guess kind of goes with what the Eagles' offenses look like. But if the Eagles are going to win the game this week, John, it's going to be an ugly win. It's not going to be similar to the game last year where they blew that team out.
No, and that's what we talked about with Cam is healthy now. He wasn't healthy in that game. And the Eagles' offense is obviously not the same as what it was performing at even last year, no matter who was playing quarterback, whether it was Foles or Sanchez. But you talked about that physicality. You're right. Carolina is a very, very physical team. I maintain if Luke Kuechly was in this town, he would be in the realm of a Brian Dawkins. That's how well regarded he would be as a football player. I think if people don't get to see him very often, you're going to say, wow, when you see him play. And Thomas Davis is just a step behind. He's almost as good. Up front, they have a lot of good interior defensive linemen. And when you think about Chip Kelly teams, we never think they're physical because of the brand of offense. I don't think that's necessarily fair because there's certain guys on this team, Jason Peters would be first and foremost, that will just beat you up. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. But one thing that you can guarantee is it's going to really punch you in the mouth, and you're going to have to respond.
All right, John, obviously that game Sunday night, I want to get a couple of thoughts on the Giants and the Cowboys who are going to face off this week. And, you know, Des Bryant listed as day-to-day. We've talked a lot about him and whether or not he's going to play or not. But let me ask you, if he does come back, how much does he make a difference if they don't have Romo? I mean, do you think that him coming back is enough of a difference maker for Dallas to keep them involved with Matt Castle and Des Bryant as the connection, as opposed to Whedon and Des Bryant?
Yeah, I think it certainly helps. And I'll tell you why, because you have a chance to win those 50-50 balls. And we see in the NFL is that nearly 75-80% of these games are within one score in the fourth quarter. So it could be one play here. It could be one play there. And Matt Castle's smart enough to understand, you know, if Des Bryant, even if he's not open, he's open, and give him a chance to make a play. He understands how to do that at the NFL level, whether it's a back shoulder throw or whether, you know, he's just throwing it to the back of the end zone. Let the star player try to make a big play. And I think in that way, Dallas would certainly improve if he's back on the football field. And they would have a far better chance to keep their head above water until Romo gets back. But they're not going to be an elite team until both Romo and Bryant are out there together again.
John, let me ask you about the Giants side of things, and with Eli Manning, the way he played last week. And, you know, did you see signs of Eli Manning kind of slipping back into this turnover-prone guy, or do you give credit to the Eagles' defense for forcing him to become that guy for at least 1 week?
Yeah, no, I give credit to the Eagles' defense. They were great. They had Manning, similar to Sam Bradford. They had him very uncomfortable for a different reason. Their rush was actually getting there, whereas Sam just thought the rush was getting there. It really wasn't. In Eli's case, he was getting taken off his spots consistently, and that's with the fact that they're trying to get the ball out very, very quickly. So not only was the pass rush getting there, was getting to him quickly, and once that happens with Eli Manning, the history's been there, whether he's been a turnover machine under Kevin Gilbride or not under Ben McAdoo. The one thing that's always consistent, if you get a pass rush on him, the mechanics are going to break down, and he's going to be prone to throw it to the other team, and that's what happened. But I give the Eagles defense a ton of credit for turning him back into that player last week.
All right, we'll dive more into that game tomorrow as well. I think that's a big game to watch. I really am interested to see how the Giants bounce back. I want to see what the Cowboys do after the bye. They've made some changes with the quarterback. They're going to look at possibly rotating the running backs more out there. You might see a change on the offensive line. They're adding some defensive pieces. We got into a lot of topics on them yesterday with the Cowboy fans who, I don't know about you, John, I think are eagerly optimistic for the return of players who, quite frankly, I just don't know. To me, and I think you agree, until Romo comes back, I just think that they're just in the middle of the pack or behind the pack with everybody else. And it could have been take Dallas' stars off the helmet. This could have been the Cleveland Browns. With those kind of injuries, especially the quarterback, that's just a problem.
No, anybody loses a quarterback the caliber of Tony Romo, it's an issue because there's a dearth of them in this league, and certainly not going to play up to that standard. And you're right. This is a team with Tony Romo that's a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Without him and without Des Bryant, they're a bad football team. And we saw the same thing happen to Green Bay a couple of years ago when Aaron Rodgers had the same exact injury. So, and they weren't able to win a football game, and when he came back, they started winning again. The same thing's going to happen to the Cowboys. But until that quarterback gets back under center, it's going to be tooth and nail every week, and they're going to have to scratch and claw to get even one win.
All right, John, back tomorrow at 4:05 with his pick on the game. For his pick, of course, 97.3 ESPN.com, and then tomorrow at 4:05 he'll give you his thoughts on the Eagles and the Panthers. We'll go over all the NFL news and notes as well on tomorrow's show. John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com with the latest on Eagles practice today and some news and notes around the league. Thanks, John.
Yeah, and real quick, Mike, before I go, 5 on the Panthers will be up later tonight so you can get the spoiler for the score, and we'll talk about it tomorrow.
All right, he'll have his score then posted a little bit later on the 5 on the Panthers, of course, and he'll do that verbally right here tomorrow night. Thanks, John.